Just a heads up before we get going, this session will be recorded. So if you need to drop off for any reason or you want to refer the session to some colleagues afterwards, then feel free to do so. It will be posted on Tableau's YouTube page. It should be up tomorrow. That's both if you're in the APAC region or if you're in Europe. So we'll let you know when that is posted. Just a little intro to the session. I set up this user group back in February as a platform to discuss and explore Tableau Prep, whether that's in the workplace or how people have been using the tools in. And we're always looking for new speakers. So if you find the session engaging and you feel like you've got something you'd like to share, then feel free to reach out to me and we can look at getting you in to present in a future session. So just an intro to me. I'm a consultant at the Information Lab in London. I've been working with Tableau for just over 18 months now. In day-to-day life, I use the whole suite of Tableau products, but I'm a particularly big fan of Tableau Prep. I think it's a really great tool. It's got a really exciting future with lots of new features constantly being released. You can reach out to me at any of the following links. So there's my Twitter, my LinkedIn, and my blog there, if you want to go to any of those links. Something that I'd just like to mention as well is that another way I get involved with Tableau Prep outside of my day-to-day job is participating in a community-run scheme called Prepping Data. So this was set up by some of my colleagues here at the Information Lab. And essentially what happens is each week they post a challenge and you'll have an input file and an output file and a few steps to take in between the two to achieve the desired outcome. It's a great way to develop your prep skills further and always stay on top of the new features that are being added. And it's a good way to engage in the community as well, because the following week, the solution will be posted by the Prepping Data team, and you can also compare your solution to others. I just think it's a really great way to learn because there's always more than one way to solve these problems that we have with data prep, and exposing yourself to other people's ways of thinking is always a great way to develop yourself. So enough about me. I'm going to move on to the sessions. So we've got three great speakers in for you today, all talking about their different use cases with Tableau Prep. Each of the speakers will talk for around about 20 minutes, and then they'll answer a couple of questions which you can submit into the Q&A box. So make sure if you do have any questions for the speakers to be putting them in the Q&A box and not the chat box, because that's where we'll be picking them up from. We'll handpick a few questions. Obviously, we won't be able to get through all of them. So we'll try to collect them at the end, and the speakers, I'm sure, will be more than happy to respond to you over email or by other means. Or if you have any other questions, Tableau Prep related, I would recommend you posting them in the Tableau community forum. So with all that, we're going to get on to our first speaker, who is Joe. So Joe, if you would like to take over from me, please.
Thanks, Jack. Just present my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing a PowerPoint slide. Hopefully that's all sorted. Good morning, everyone. I know it's not morning for everyone, but it is for me. I'm in London here. Today, I'm going to be talking about the script tool. So for those of you who know Tableau Prep and have 2019.3 or above, might have seen the script tool, but you might not have used it yet. So I'm going to talk about how we can get even more out of Tableau Prep by using R scripts, which is one of the options of the script tool. But before we talk about that, a little bit about me. My name's Joe Pickin. I work for a company called Truecue, and I'm an analytics consultant. So I spend my day using Tableau Desktop, Tableau Prep, and lots of other tools, building data visualization solutions for different clients. I'm also a Tableau trainer. So for those of you who've taken the official kind of Tableau Desktop and Prep courses, you might have had me. Probably not if you've had an in-person one in, let's say, Australia, but especially in London, I definitely kind of hang about. My background is in maths and statistics, which kind of led me down the path to using R, and I'll talk about R in a second. If you'd like to contact me either sort of after the session or you're watching this on record about what I'm doing today, there's my email there. And if you'd like to follow what I'm doing, I also have a Tableau public page and the link is there. In my spare time, I sing in a barbershop quartet, my barbershop quartet there called Tagline, and that's me on the end, scrunching up my face and singing some high notes. So today's agenda, I'm going to talk about why do we want to use the script tool. We can see some examples of the script tool on the right-hand side. How we're going to get started. I'm going to spend most of the time in Tableau Prep and R showing some demos, and I'm going to reference an article right at the end, which kind of contains this information in quite a lot of detail if you're interested in really taking it further. So why do we want to use the script tool? So the script tool allows us to run custom R and Python scripts on your data. And if you haven't heard of those two tools, they're free open source software. They've got a huge user base, and there's a massive range of functions available. So like I said, my background was in maths and stats, and at university, I spent a lot of time using R. It's a sort of statistical tool, and was really impressed by all the amazing things it can do. Now, Prep is amazing, and I use it every day, but it doesn't have everything. So we can extend the capabilities of Prep in terms of data wrangling and also data science by allowing these tools to sort of kind of be intertwined. Now, I'm going to focus on R today rather than Python, and that's because I feel there's a lot of resources already out there looking at how to use Python scripts in Tableau Prep and Tableau Desktop. So I kind of think there's a bit of a kind of gap in the market there for using R, and also I really like R, so I'm a bit biased. So to get started, if you wanted to kind of follow along with the steps I'm about to show you, first of all, you need Tableau Prep 2019.3 or above, and you need to download and install R. So R is a free program. There's one of the links you can use to download it is there. There's also a kind of an extra program called R Studio. This is just R with a nice interface. So I use R Studio because I can kind of see the scripts I'm running and the outputs at the same time. Okay, so let's jump straight into R. Sorry, let's start with Tableau Prep. Okay, here I am in Tableau Prep. I'm just going to introduce you to the data that I'm going to be working with in this session. So it's about as simple as you could get, and that's because I really want to focus on the tool. Here are some kind of fake made-up names and ages. So literally 2 columns, 12 people, and then their ages. Now, I've kept it really simple, and I'm going to be showing you a couple of different script tool steps. Now, one of the things that I would always recommend doing before we do anything to using a script step is just to output that data. And the reason is, if I output the data, I can upload my data into R or Python or whatever you're using and test out my script. So I would often use that CSV and run the flow, and I can save that just somewhere on my computer so I can kind of access that file. So that's just one little tip I'd use before we get started. Let's jump into R here. So this is what the R interface looks like. I've got my scripts that I run at the top, and these are the ones that I save and reference in R. And down here, I've kind of got like the R interface, and this is R Studio, which I prefer. Now, once I've downloaded R, I need to install a package here called rserve. And that just allows Tableau Prep to sort of communicate with R and run scripts. So if you're doing it for the very first time, you need to install the package. Since I've already done that, every time I use scripts in Tableau Prep, I need to run these 2 lines of code, which is just kind of starting up my server. So if I click run there, then it basically starts up that R serve for me. So pretty simple, nothing too complicated so far. Now, what do I want to do to this data? Well, I've got a couple of examples. Now, I could have started in Tableau Prep. Those of you who've used it before, we can do loads of really great things. One of the things I can't do in Tableau Prep is sort my data. So I can't sort this, for example, by age, sort of lowest to highest or highest to lowest. I can't index my data. So I can't have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down to 12. And before the latest version, so before 2020.1, I couldn't rank data. So I couldn't have like a column saying 1 is the highest and 12 is the lowest. So I actually used R scripts before that latest release to sort of jump into that. So like I said, one of the most important things we can do is test it in R. So always test your script before we actually put it back into Tableau Prep. So here I've got a very simple step. It just says read in my data into this variable called ages data. And I'm going to make my data into a data frame. So looking at the bottom down there, df is my data frame, and it looks exactly the same as what we had in Tableau Prep. Now, R scripts work using a data frame object. That's a data frame is something that we have in R. So when we're testing our data, have df, call your data df, and then you can run it and practice it as a data frame. This is something I wrote. It's what I call a generic R script. So how does Tableau Prep actually work with it? Well, it works through functions. So I have to define a function. Here I've called it my function name, and it works on that df, that data frame. So whatever data is in the step before my script runs in a df, the data frame. Now, to output columns that are already there, I have to kind of define my existing columns. That dollar just means extract the column name. So df $name would extract the name column. And when I want to define new columns, so for example, if I wanted to add an index, I would write my new column name with a df $, and I would define an R function there. And right at the end, I return my new data frame with those new and existing columns. So that's the first half. My function name, I'm going to use that in Tableau Prep as well. And finally, at the end, I have to give every single column a data type. So I know this is already defined in Tableau Prep, but we need to kind of do it again. So whatever existing columns or new columns I have, I need to just tell Tableau Prep, is that a string, is that an integer, or anything else. That's my kind of generic R script. Let's take a look at that index example. So this is pretty simple, and I want to keep it simple so we can really understand it. I define my function, my index function, to be a function on df, my data frame. Name is my existing column. Just extract the column name from my data frame. And my age here, I actually don't need that df. I can just, that's also an existing column, but this is my new one. I'm going to say my index there this is my function, goes from 1 to the number of rows in my data frame, which is 12. So I need a 1 to 12, and I'm going to return my data frame. Now I've already kind of read in the data, so I can actually run this first half. This is how I test it. Run that first half. It defines my index function. I can type that in, index function on my df, and I can test that's working. So that's my new column, 1 all the way through to 12. So indexing can be really useful in data, just to kind of, especially if something's already ordered, we can index our data to kind of use it as like a top 3, for example. So I know that this works in R. How do I get it to work in Tableau Prep? So let's jump straight back in. I can get rid of my output step. That was just there to test. And I'm going to add a script. I add my script. And in this settings, I have the option to choose RServe or Tableau Python. So I'm going to stick with R. Now, when it says connect to RServe server, it needs to kind of reference a computer that it's running on. If you choose local host and 6311, that just means it's running on my computer, and that's all sorted. So if I sign into there, that's going to work. And just as a reminder, I need to have my RServe running for this to work. I need to find the script file. So those of you who haven't worked with this before, this is my script file. I've defined my data types at the bottom. I need to, file save that. So I save that as it's kind of like a .r file. It's a bit like a text file. And I'm going to upload that into my data. So I'm going to find my file. And I need to this one's my index. My function name is the one I defined at the beginning. So that's my index function. Type that in and press enter. And give it a chance to run. And there it is. It's outputted my index column. I could then carry on using that index column in whatever way I wanted. Take just number 2, take just number 10, anything that you want in that step. So that there is my index script in action. Right, so we've got a little bit more time, so let's carry on. One of the most useful functions that I've found is actually sorting our data. Sorting, I think, is really powerful, and Tableau Prep doesn't have a way to sort the actual kind of output data in that bottom half. So let's do a practice again. Here I've got a sort age function, takes my name and my age, and this is the sorting. So I order my data frame by a column. So I'm doing it at the moment by age. And then at the bottom, I'm just saying my name is a string and my age is an integer. So let's just test that first half, make sure it works. Type in my sort age at the bottom. And you can see it's actually changed my data frame. I've got 10 going down to 119. Now, if I wanted, I could pop in a minus in front of that df, run that. And now it swaps the order, so I can have kind of biggest to smallest there. And just depends exactly how you want. So again, I saved that as a sorting R file. I'm going to go back into Tableau Prep. I'm going to add a different script step here. I'm going to find my sorting file. What's my function there? Type this in, sort age, click enter. And let's take a look at my data underneath. There we go. It sorted it in terms of the top to the bottom. So really simple things, but I think these add a lot of value to a lot of the data prep work that we do. I'm going to show you one more quickly. That's the outlier function. So add a script step here. And I'll kind of do it in here first. So we have the outlier. And for those of you who've worked with histograms before, sorry, not histograms, box plots, box and whisker plots, it kind of uses the same logic for outliers there. So if you're kind of 1.5 times away from the interquartile range, then you get a 1. So here's my 1 when it's an outlier and 0 when it's not an outlier. So we see that high value of 119 has been flagged as 1. Let's take a quick look at that script. The only difference here is this function. My outlier flag, tests whether the age is above the interquartile range times 1.5, that type of thing. If yes, 1. If no, 0. So they're not complicated functions, but it just extends that capability. Now, one of the big reasons I say test it in R first is because it's very sensitive to mistakes. So I'm going to go back to my index function and just imagine that instead of having a dollar sign there in the df, I'd accidentally put a star. And I'd save this. I'd gone into Tableau Prep. In my index function, I kind of uploaded my file, my index. And I'm going to click enter. And what's happened is we get this, something went wrong when running the script. Verify there are no errors, then try again. So that happens a lot. And if we try and just change something in the script step and re-upload it and run, we're going to just get into a really long-winded process. So much better to try and run this in R. Something goes wrong, and then I can really clearly see, quickly test that, save it, re-upload it, and that's just going to save me so much time. So the final thing I want to talk about is when can this get really complicated? So here's an example of a function I wrote, which was, I'll show you the prep flow in a second, but here I've added lots of new columns. I've done things where I've used cumulative sums, so adding up on the go. I've done things where this is kind of shifted. We're looking at multi-row formulas here, so taking the value from a certain row and then minusing a value from the row behind, that type of thing that we can't currently do in Tableau Prep. And just to quickly show you what that looks like. Now this is, I'm not proud of how ugly I did my flow here, but this is a script step in a real life flow. I was looking at deprivation data. I've got some columns here. Hopefully they'll load. Someone in the chat said, now that's a layout. Yeah, not recommended, not best practice for the layout. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through this really quickly, but I've got small areas in the UK. I've got populations and deprivation ranks. It's a measure called the IMD. Now, this one of my columns that I measured in Tableau Prep takes the running sum of that population. And when we get to a new sort of value, it starts again. So kind of running sum up to a point. I have a flag there, a 0 or a 1, whether something is above 10% of the population. So I ordered it in terms of least deprived to most deprived. And when the sum of the population, 7,000, got above 10% of the total population of the bigger area, then it is a 1, else it's a 0. And I use that for analysis further down the line. It's a measure called local concentration. So hopefully that just gives you a flavor of how you could use it in a more complicated scenario. So very final thing, if you are interested and you want to learn more about this, I wrote an article quite recently. There's a link there and a QR code. This really takes you through all the examples in detail, including the full setup, and it has a link to download the flow, download all the kind of R scripts, and really kind of play around with that yourself. So if you are interested, then I would really recommend having a look at that. But otherwise, I think that's me done, unless we have any questions.
Yeah, hi, Joe. Thanks for that. That was a really great session. Yeah, we do have a few questions for you. One from me, actually, is you've almost answered it a little bit here with this little article that you've written, but how would you recommend beginners starting out with R to go about learning some key functions that you might use in Tableau Prep?
Yeah, really good question. So because R's got a big community of users, there's lots of really great kind of start how-to guides. Actually, in that article I mentioned, I linked to a few kind of starter basic, this is how to get going with R. But one of the reasons I really like it is I think it's actually quite simple, the kind of, what's it called? The language that you use in R. So yeah, I'd say go on that article, have a look at those links that I've kind of forwarded people onto to get started.
Okay, sounds great. I'd agree with you. I have never used R before, but just from watching that presentation, you've explained everything very clearly.
Thank you.
And I'd like to think I'd be able to pick some of it up.
I'm sure you can.
And then, thank you. We've got a question from Rude, which also ties into something that I was going to ask you as well. So, Rude has asked, what's on the #1 spot of your prep wish list? What announcement for the next update would make you the most happy? So, and I was going to ask you, what do you most commonly use the R tool for, which perhaps might indicate what features Tableau could be bringing to Tableau Prep. So I guess you can tie that all into one.
Yeah, great question. #1 has got to be sorting. So I know you can sort in the profile pane, and that is really useful sometimes. But just to be able to sort the data underneath, I think is really helpful. Not even for analysis, just for like understanding and seeing things. So sort by certain columns would certainly be up there. And like I said before this release, ranking would have been massively up there. But they listened to me. I didn't tell them, but they listened to my brain and created that in the latest version.
Okay, great. Finally, Simon, which is asking how much of this is possible in basic prep, not builder. Simon, I'm not too sure I fully understand the question, but it may be that, so Tableau renamed Tableau Prep Builder, sort of mid 2019. It might have been 2019.1. So if you're using an older version of Tableau Prep, as Joe mentioned, not the server-based version. So basically, as Joe mentioned, if you're running Tableau Prep, if you've got Tableau Prep, was it 2019.3 or later, Joe?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, then you can leverage the Python and R scripts in your flow. And you can also run, if you have Tableau Prep Conductor as part of the data management add-on, you can run these on your Tableau server. And then one last question for you, Joe, is can R scripts be used in Tableau or Tableau Prep to link to data files that I might otherwise download using Excel Power Query URL?
So I would say no, it only works with data that's already in your Tableau Prep flow. So I can upload whatever of those, data into Tableau Prep, but I can't add new data via the script tool. It only works with data that's currently in the step before my script step. If that was the question, yeah.
I think that's the question. Yeah. So something I'd add to that is I think there are cases out there where people have called, say, an API using, I haven't actually seen it done with an R script, so it may be slightly different, but I've seen it done with a Python script where people have actually almost inputted some dummy data into prep and put that into the scripting tool and then almost overwritten it.
Oh, interesting.
So it's, yeah, as Joe's saying, Joe's fully correct in saying that you have to have the data input from Tableau Prep into that scripting tool. But I think you can sort of almost trick the scripting tool into thinking it's got a data frame from Tableau Prep. Well, it's not tricking it into thinking that it does have a data frame from Tableau Prep and then just
I'm with you.
writing that data frame. So yeah, it's one to explore.
Yep.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. That's great.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to Mohammed now. So Mohammed, if you'd like to take over the screen share.
Thanks, Joe, for the great presentation. I actually in my workflows, I'm going to answer a couple of those questions that you just asked. But first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Mohammed. I work as a data analytics consultant for the Data School down under. I joined about 2 years ago. I have a background in economics and analytics. The Data School, for you who do not know, is similar to an apprenticeship program where a consultant joins Data School. They are trained for 4 months on data analytics and data visualization best practices using Tableau and Alteryx and Tableau Prep. And then after the 4 months, we start helping the Data School clients. Down here, you can see my contact details if you have any questions after the session. Outside of data, I enjoy cooking, specifically in the Middle Eastern cuisine, and these are some of my recent dishes. Today, I'm going to talk about inspiration behind my presentation today is a question I asked myself about a month ago. I wanted to track COVID-19 data in my local government area, in my LGA, because I tried to Google how many cases of COVID-19 we have in my specific LGA. So I got the answer of Google, but I couldn't find any resource that would tell me what has the trend been. Are we peaking? Is the curve flattening? So this is mainly the inspiration behind the workflow I built today. So I'm going to be using Python and Tableau Prep to collect data for all the LGAs in Australia. That will be a quick demo. I will try to keep it high level. But then I'm going to talk about collating and transforming data in Tableau Prep, so that I will build from scratch. I'll be connecting to some Google Sheets and some SQL data sources. And I will also be showcasing the new features Joe was talking about, like ranking and level of detail, and how we can use ranking to create other window calculations. I'm a big fan of window calculations in Tableau, but also I like to finish all the calculations that I want to do in Tableau in the preparation stage, so that I enjoy the visualization more and not have to be creating calculations all the time. Also, if I have enough time, I'll be trying to visualize the data that I output from the workflow. So let me jump right into it. I'm glad that Joe went first and he showcased how the scripting works in Tableau Prep. Essentially, and we were just discussing the concept of calling APIs by tricking Tableau Prep and inputting a URL or an API endpoint and then calling it via a script, which is exactly what I'm doing. Let me first of all show you the data source I'm dealing with. So again, I asked myself a question a little about a month ago on how do we track LGA level coronavirus cases. So I Googled, essentially with my Google search, after my Google search, I arrived to a Guardian public data source, which actually contains 4 URLs. Each of these URLs takes you to a daily update by LGA. So you can see here, place, this is the LGA name, the current count, this is the cumulative count, and the date. And so this is the 29th. If I refresh, it's going to be the 30th. So this data is updated daily, and it actually overwrites any existing data. So the first challenge was connecting to the data using Prep, which I'm going to explain how I did in a second. And then the data gets updated daily, so I wanted a way to database, which is what my other Python script will be doing. So let me get to the script. I picked 2 Australian states, Victoria and New South Wales. I provide the workflow, the URL we just saw. It is in JSON format. So my Python script essentially has to call the data in that URL and then parse it from the JSON format to a data frame, and then output it to Tableau Prep. In here, I have the Python script I'm using. So I define a function that gets the data. It receives the URL from Prep. It opens the URL, reads the JSON data, and then parses it, then puts it in a data frame. Then define the columns that we want to output to Tableau Prep, date, place, and count, and then the data types, as Joe explained for me. So this is the output we get. And then I do some cleanup to the data, to the LGA names. I capitalize everything. I make sure everything is consistent. And I create a primary key because I have for some reason it's not showing up here, but I created a table in the database which has these columns. So a primary key, a place, a state, an area, total cases, and date reported. So I needed a primary key, which I created from my data. And then I want to tell Prep to insert the data into my database so that every day when I run the script, I'm adding a new data to the data. But also, if I run it multiple times during the day, I want my data to get updated. I don't want to keep stacking data, which takes me to my next script, which writes the database. What this script does, we have a function, write to database. What it does, we define a SQL schema for the table I'm dealing with. I give it my table name, and then I define all the columns. And then I give them variable names. So that if I want to reuse the script, I don't need to name it very specific things, but I have ready to use variables, and then I just input the column name in any table I want to use in the future. Also, of course, you need to provide the configurations for your database. Of course, I did not include in this demo. So you need a driver, a database, a server, username, password, unless you have Windows authentication. Then you connect to the database. Now, what I'm Python to do is for every row in the data frame that I'm getting from Tableau Prep. So this is getting from Tableau Prep. For every row of this data, I want you to check, does the primary key exist? If so, then update the data. If not, then insert these variables that I had defined. Finally, I want you to return the data frame, and I can see the other side of the data out of the script tool. Also, Prep needs an output to run, so I also output the data to a TDE on my local machine. And that's it for writing data to the data. This is not what I wanted to focus on today. I wanted to talk about the new features. Mostly, I was very excited when ranking came into play because it opens up so many options in Prep. And in the same data source that was made public by The Guardian, also provided a sheet, a Google sheet that had daily updates by state. So I was also interested in looking at cases, tests, intensive care accounts by state. So I decided to blend data together. So here I'm just going to build that workflow from scratch. I connect to the Google Sheet through the Tableau Prep Connect. When you actually connect, Prep is going to ask you to authenticate your connection. So you just need to select your account and allow Tableau to access your Google Drive. And then you just select the sheet that you want to connect to. Now I have the data. So I have 19 data columns in total. From the sampling, I can already see that I have a lot of sample nulls. That doesn't necessarily mean the column is null, but Prep saw a lot of nulls. So this is the sample it gave. Let me just add a clean step to view the data. In the recommendations, you're going to see that Prep is going to ask you to remove a lot of fields, and that is because of all the nulls we have. Now, you have a quick look, for example, at tests conducted, you're going to notice that 75% of the rows are null. The reason for that is we do not update tests conducted daily, but rather they're cumulative and they're only reported on specific days. And it's very similar for the rest of the columns. So we're going to see that mostly 70% of our data is null. Now, for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm just going to focus on cumulative cases, and I wanted to showcase the ranking functionality as well as the level of detail functionality. Another thing is, notice that we have a time column, which suggests that the data could get updated several times during a day. So that means I'm going to average the number of cases I have in a day. So I'm going to start by aggregating the data. So I'm going to group by date and by state. And then I'm going to ask Prep to average the cumulative case count. Here we go. We have some nulls. I can see already that means some days were not reported. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exclude those, and I'll explain why in a second. There you go. Now we have every state or every date, we have the cumulative case count. What I want to do is I want to find the daily case count. And the reason I excluded the nulls, some days we might not have cases reported. So we won't have the cumulative count. But what I want to do is find the next cumulative count. So on the first and on the third, I don't really care if the days are consecutive or not. So now I'm going to explain some logic behind ranking. So imagine we have this original data set where we have two dates, the 1st of Jan and the 2nd of Jan. And we have 5 cases on the first day, and then they became 10 cases, so we have +5. If I rank this data on date, then rank 1 would be, and it's on ascending date, rank 1 would be 1st of Jan, and 2 would be the 2nd of Jan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rank the data, then I'm going to say I want to -1 from the rank. And then I'm going to create a branch of this data. So it'll be the exact same thing. I'll change the cumulative cases column to subtract this. And then I'm going to keep the rank. So I'm not going to negate 1 from the rank for the branch data set. Now, imagine you want to join these two data sets. What happens is I'm going to join on rank, right? So the 1st of Jan joins to the 2nd of Jan. And now I have the cumulative cases from the 2nd of Jan and the prior cases from the 1st of Jan. So all I have to do is subtract this, and I'll get to the daily cases. Let me show you guys how this works in Prep. If I create a ranking field, so it's going to say this feature isn't compatible with my Tableau server. So it just warns you that if you use it, you cannot publish your workflow on using Prep Conductor. But I'm going to use it anyways. So it gave me a rank. So again, I highlighted my data. I created a rank, and then I can decide what I want to group by. In this case, I want to group by state. And if I keep going, it's going to reset at Southern Australia. And notice that the dates are consecutive, but are not consecutive, but this is the next available date because I excluded nulls. Now for the next step, I want to rename this. And a new feature in Prep, I think it's 2 versions back. Now we can copy tools that wasn't available before. I'm just going to copy this tool. I want to do the exact same thing with it. But on the left-hand side, the original data set, I want to create a calculation. Say I want my rank to be rank -1. Then I'm going to join the 2 data sets and on state, because remember the rank resets for every state. Notice how we have 8 rows from the left-hand side that didn't join. These are the first days. This is the first day reported for every state, so I'm going to do a left join to maintain that. And then I'm just going to add a clean state to my results. It's good that we only have these 8 excluded, which means our join worked in a sense. We still have 443 rows between the 2 data sets, which means we didn't duplicate any data. This is always a good sign. I'm just going to remove all the columns I do not need. And then I'm just going to rename this to subtract this. and create a calculated field called daily cases. My daily cases are going to be cumulative cases like this. There we go. And now we have our daily cases. Next, I'm going to talk about level of detail calculations. So I really love level of detail calculations, and I use them quite frequently in Tableau. What Tableau Prep made available was the fixed level of detail calculations. So for LODs, you have fixed, include, and exclude. Only fixed was made available. Now, a fixed LOD calculation is similar to using aggregate, taking the data to a certain level. So let's say I want to see the max cumulative count. So now my data is at the level of detail state, and it's giving me the max cumulative. If I wanted to append this max to every state, previously I would need to create an aggregate and then join the data on states. That way I would have a column that says max cases. Now, with the importance of level of detail calculations is that they allow you to use fewer steps in your workflow. So you can just work here and do the exact same concept I made using aggregate and join. So I'm just going to create a field called latest date. And I'm going to use a level of detail calculations to find the latest by state. This is taking the data a level up. So I'm going to go fixed. And for every state, give me the max date. So apparently for all the, on the 29th, New South Wales, Northern Territory, South Australia, and Tasmania were reported, and the rest were on the 30th. Next, I want to find the latest cumulative cases. So here, I'll just statement that says if my date, my normal date field, is equal to the latest date, and give me the cumulative cases. Notice that we're going to have the correct numbers, but we're going to have 98% null. That is because Prep only gave us the numbers where the latest date intersected with the date. What I want to do is, again, I want to append the max cumulative to every row for every state. So this is, again, where I'm going to use level of details. So cases. I'm just going to go fix in for every state. Give me the max. Notice now that the null is here. So now if I get South Wales, for example, I'll have all of my rows will be 3016, and I don't need this. Now I'm just going to jump to what this will finally look like, because I've covered all the concepts that I wanted to cover. Essentially, I did the exact same thing for deaths, and then I connected to my SQL data that had the LG, the cases by LGAs, and then I unioned all the data together and created one single source of truth for all the updates for Australia by state and by LGA. Now, what we could potentially do when we have this data together is for New South Wales, for example. See how many cases I have so far is the curve flattening, where the hotspots are within New South Wales. And then this is the part, this is essentially my motivation. I wanted to see an LGA, and I wanted to see the trend, and is the curve flattening. On the right here, we can see also the top 5 LGAs by cases and whether there are new cases still coming in, and whether the curve itself. Let me return to my question. Here I also included some resources on how to set up TabPy, which is similar to RServe, which Joe talked about. It's the TabPy server. You need to. There's a very good blog on the Information Lab page that talks about setting up TabPy server in Tableau. And for the data that I accessed, you can go to the Guardian under the link below. Thank you. I guess I'll give the floor back to Jack for any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. Showcase some really interesting features there of Prep, in particular the new ones that have been released with 2020.1 in Rank and LOD. A question for you, which I think is referring back to when there were multiple times in the day that cases could have been reported. Why did you opt for an average and not a median or a min or a max?
I guess it was just a rule of thumb for me where I just averaged the cases because the cases come from different sources. So it's not about the cases increasing during the day, but it's multiple channels reporting the cases or reporting different numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be a good idea in this case.
Sure. And a question from me is, so in that demo, you've stretched the scripting tool quite far in terms of calling an API. You've used it to write to a database. I was wondering how much further, if you have, you've pushed that capability of bringing in some extra features to Prep using the scripting tool.
I would say this is as far as I went, and reason being, these are two features that I really, really want Prep to have, which are calling APIs and writing to a database. Other than that, I think Prep does most of what I needed to do when I'm preparing data.
Okay, cool. Is there anything else that you've thought about trying to get the scripting tool to do?
Maybe some data science, predictive analytics, possibly. But I think it won't be. The problem with doing that in Python and Prep is deploying the solution. But yeah, possibly some predictive stuff could be useful.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for all that, Mohammed.
Thank you.
So finally, our final speaker of the session is Stephen. So Stephen, if you would like to take over control, please. Stephen, you may be on mute if you're not speaking.
Yeah, I was just finding where the mute button was. Yeah, thanks for that, guys. So what I'm sort of going to be going through is a slightly sort of more contextual arrangement around what Tableau Prep has done for a business. So it's not as technical as what the previous two presentations are. And so what I'm going to do is come through, and so what I'm going to go through is first just talk about who I am, what I do, and then also going through a case study of a monthly reporting process and sort of dashboards that we all sort of probably come across, especially when upper management sort of wants to see some various different things, and dashboard is a key thing they always bring up that they want to see. And then so from there, actually break down the dashboard a little bit, so go a little bit behind the scenes, and then from there I'll jump into Tableau Prep to actually show how Tableau Prep actually solved a sort of problem that the client had. So I'm just getting into it. So first, set and scene. Who am I? Proud Kiwi, living in Christchurch, New Zealand. So I've already had dinner and ready for bed after this presentation is finished. So I'm married to a wonderful lady from the Dominican Republic. I've got a 6-month-old daughter, so hopefully she's in bed by now. And then also got another baby boy due in June. So life is going to be busy. Professionally, I work for Deloitte. So I'm a consulting manager in the finance and performance offering. So we look at a number of different things of clients and finance, as well as operational data to help clients improve their performances. So as part of my role, I've actually worked firsthand with a number of clients with Tableau as well as Tableau Prep, and I could see firsthand what a difference it actually makes to a number of our businesses. So what do we use at Deloitte Tableau Prep for? So basically, same as you guys. So we combine, shape, and clean multiple sets of data. And as part of that, it's basically to undertake analysis of the work that we do for our clients for their performances. So Tableau Prep is one of the tools that we use to help clients to improve their processes, like with reporting and so on. So the analysis of the business performance, which actually then links through to actually understanding what's going on in the business, so the decision business makers can actually make decisions. So we'll just jump quickly into the case study. So first of all, just higher level about thinking about, which is more related to Tableau Prep than, to Tableau rather than Tableau Prep, but Tableau Prep has a key role to play in your reporting process. So the first thing is a little bit of human-centered design. So basically thinking about who is a user, who are you reporting to? Is it to the board, executives, senior management? Are you reporting to your team or other stakeholders? And also actually get an understanding what insights is the end user trying to understand. So quite often we have seen people deliver sort of dashboards and reports and things like that, but it doesn't actually hit the mark of what the end user wants to see. So that's one key thing to actually work in with your end user of what is it they actually want to understand. What do they want to make a decision on? And then also the other sort of a key area to look at is what level of detail are you going to be reporting on. So it will depend quite highly on what level of the organization you're reporting. If you're reporting through to a board or the executive level organization, they may just want to see a high level of what's going on. However, if you're actually down reporting to the functional areas of the organization, they may want to actually see a higher level of detail so they get a handle on what's going on. So this is the dashboard that we will sort of be delving into a little bit. So what this is so first of all, to give a bit of context, so it's a project report, so it's a project status report for the construction industry. So just as a bit of context, so many of you will know that in Christchurch in 2010 and 2011, there were devastating earthquakes. So as part of that, there's a rebuild program initiated by the central government. And so as part of that, there was a blueprint plan come up, which had a lot of different anchor projects planned to sort of rebuild and regenerate the city. So the Crown set up a project management company to deliver a number of these major anchor projects. So the projects included things like inner city roading, cycleways, promenades, public spaces, a large convention centre, and a metropolitan sort of sports facility. And so the company itself uses multiple systems to manage all those various aspects of the businesses. So where I've got written down there in front of you, you got things like health and safety, schedule progress, budget and cost, risk and issues, and also we allow for a bit of executive summary. So this is in a just a bigger context so you can see. So up the top, we've got a bit of health and safety where we're talking about incidences and how they're actually reporting. Over here, if you think about a project, of how well it is actually tracking to the baseline, is it delayed, how are they actually going? A different section on budget and cost, so how are you going with your budget, and sort of various different charts. And then down the bottom, it's around the risks and the issues of the projects, where the project teams are saying, yeah, this is how we're actually going about mitigating them, and this is the risks to the project. And then executive summary space for people to say. So as part of when we're actually developing up this dashboard, we got into some things that looking at to understand what we actually need to do. So first thing is key metrics. So what were we actually going to be reporting on? So working with the end users is key, and that with stakeholders as well. So you actually agree on the key metrics that they want to see reported on. The next sort of thing is representation. How are you going to visualize the metrics? So we've found that simplicity works best. A nice simple chart rather than something that's too busy. So once again, engage with the end users, because quite often they already have an idea of what they want to see. Even though you talk to different people, they may have different opinions of what they want to see. But the other thing is, don't be afraid to ask them and take them sort of new ideas. So while the people you are reporting to may be experts on the business, you guys quite often will be in the role and the experts in the reporting the information in a clear and concise manner. So they know what's going on in the business, but you guys will be the experts in actually how to communicate that information and the metrics up. The sort of next key consideration is frequency. So how often do you actually need to report? So the example we'll be going into is a monthly process. So obviously with a monthly process, it's repeated month on month, and there's various different elements of that you want to automate as much as possible. However, if you're only doing an annual report, is it something that you do need to put so much more rigor around the processes and frequencies? So it's just something to consider, and it may impact on how much effort you actually need to put into the process and what you're trying to develop. The next thing that sort of ties into frequency as well is also data capture. Where is the information coming from? Is it a reliable source? How clean is the data? And also linked with frequency, how often is it refreshed? So if you're reporting monthly, but you've got data that's only refreshed every 6 months, is no use reporting on it monthly. So the other thing is also, is all the data captured for what you're actually required to report on? So if you're trying to report on things like schedule progress, if you don't have dates, you can't actually report on schedule progress, let alone the various activities. And the last one I've got here is related to system integration. So as I mentioned, the client that we're working with has got a number of different systems where they manage the different elements of the project. So the question is like, how are you going to actually pull all the information together? Do the systems talk to each other? Or are you going to have to use a tool like Tableau Prep to use an intermediary process to combine or cleanse the data? So this is an example for the client, and this is from a consultant perspective of how people would explain it. So yes, you've got your reporting audience, Tableau's used to create and generate the reports, and here goes the multitude of different systems that are inputting into Tableau for your dashboards and so on. So that's where I went through of like schedule, your budget and cost, your risks, your health and safety, plus there's obviously other Excel workbooks used for other data like tables of who is the project manager and things like that. So that's how it will be explained. However, in reality, it looks something a little bit more like this. So where the multiple systems are basically exporting into a CSV or an Excel and then pulled into Tableau. So Tableau is pulling the data from multiple sources to create the dashboard of multiple charts and different containers. And it was causing a headache for the client because it was for one thing, was very slow at rendering all those visualizations. And the other side of it too was that data was being manipulated within Excel to cleanse and create the workarounds to achieve the desired results. And as previously mentioned, in this particular company, there's no data warehouse that is actually used by the business. So it's a young, immature company. It doesn't have all those systems and processes in there related to actually building a database and a data warehouse that you can easily report upon. So just to quickly round off the sort of dashboard reporting side of things, one of the key things of lessons learned is actually understand what data is captured and where the gaps are. And so part of that is actually the processes that if you're using Tableau Prep, that's where you actually pick up, oh, actually we don't have that data. And as the previous presenters actually showed, there are other ways to actually grab that data and pull it into your flow and your actually data set that you can do your analysis in Tableau in. You also, when you're developing dashboards, you'll also go through numerous iterations. You'll be going back and forth with the end users until you sort of settle on something. So as part of that, a sound advice that we now actually give out to people is don't spend too much time on your initial designs. So all that formatting can come later. If you're going for multiple iterations, you're wasting time if you're spending a lot of time on your color formatting and how it looks. That can be sorted out later. So, and also one of the key lessons learned is that developing the dashboard. So once that's done, you're settled, that's only an incremental part of the whole process. The real work begins after you've actually developed the dashboard. Yes, you've built in automations and everything else, but there'll be other elements that they want to improve, and it's a continual iteration process to go through for a dashboard. So what we're going to do is now just go behind the scenes of to help provide the context of the complexity of visualization. So this is once again the dashboard that we're sort of going to be delving into a little bit. And so just to reiterate, there's no data warehouse in this company. So the monthly reporting that is taken is basically just a snapshot taken at the end of the month to what we call like a data freeze. So no changes actually made during that period. So the monthly versions are basically saved down and they're kept separate. That is to say, a new month's data does not actually overwrite the previous month's data. So as you can imagine, as your time progresses over the life of the project or the program that you were dealing with, is that you now have multitudes of Excel work files or CSV files that you're trying to actually pull through, which just slows the process down. So part of this, so the one we're going to delve into is this seemingly simple chart here, just this column chart in the budget and cost. So coming into it a little bit further, there's a few complexities that come into it. So first of all, there's a number of different elements in the visualization. So first of all, there's the reporting of historic results. So in the normal blue, you've got the budget, the forecast is the light blue, and you've got the actual cost in the dark blue. So there's a comparison there to actually see of how they're actually performing against the budget and what the forecast was. The other one is, so there's also the forecast. So what's going to happen in the future? So you've got data coming in from various different sources of what they're now predicting the forecasting spend would be, as well as what the forecasted budget profile would look like. And then the other one is that line chart. So the line chart, which is the reporting accuracy of the historic forecasting. So basically that is a percentage of last month we said we would do $100. But we only achieved $47, so therefore we only achieved a 47% forecasting accuracy. So those are some of just the metrics that we're looking at. So to delve into the sort of complexities a little bit further, so the client uses a system called ProAlliance to manage the budget, cost, and forecast and actual information and things like that. And so that gets exported into a Excel workbook, so the current month's data, and that there informs what the forecast is in the future is. The other side of it is that then we actually have to look at our historic month's data. So there are multiple files that we're actually trying to pull through. So the segments of the monthly data is collated into one data table in Excel. So we bring all those and bring them all into Excel. Sorry, I should actually reiterate, this is before Tableau Prep. And so basically you bring like the likes of January's forecast of February, add in February's forecast of March, and March's forecast of April. So as you could see, it's basically your union that you would actually create in Tableau Prep, but it's done manually within Excel every single month. And so that brings its own issues around making sure you've captured the whole data to copy paste. And we're also making sure that we're only using that respective month's forecast of the following months across all those different line items and cost accounts within the data set. So basically they use a filter and then they cut and paste exercise. So the manual data entry required is actually also required to note which month the data is actually taken from. And then so there's a risk of incorrectly copying and pasting the data in the correct manner to ensure that all the data is captured, as well as like no rows or lines were deleted or overwritten. And the other sort of element of it, if something went wrong, they'd have to actually restart the whole process again, which is just a headache for the reporting analysts who actually undertake this process. So from that sort of combined in Excel, it creates a forecast accuracy, which then actually comes into the chart itself. So as you can see, there's a number of different elements to what looks like a simplistic chart. So enough of PowerPoint. What we'll do is now jump into Tableau Prep and actually show what we actually help the client actually do to actually make life a lot easier for the reporting analyst. So they still export on those historic data sources. So the good thing with Tableau Prep is that you could create your flow and it was a repeatable process. So first of all, you've got your sort of historic data sources, which were then actually used and brought into a union. Then it was sort of cleaned and shaped, aggregated, and then also down the bottom, you bring you through your current data source because it's slightly different of the data you need from it. And then once again, cleansed, aggregate, and then unioned, and then outputted and actually put into Excel. So what I will do now is go into Tableau Prep. So this is the visualization you just, or the flow that you just saw in the PowerPoint slide. So basically what we were doing is bringing the various different worksheets, or in this case it'd be the workbooks from Excel through, and then bringing them into a union. So because all the data names are pretty much the same, everything all works nicely. I'm just hoping that that comes through nice and quickly. The other thing I should mention, because it was in Excel, given the size of the number of rows, I think there was over 20,000 rows in Excel for each data set. And as you can imagine, as you get further on, it each month progressively gets larger. And if you're just accumulating them into a different file set, Excel starts to become a little bit unwieldy. And so that was another headache that was actually coming through. So as we can see, coming into here, so we're looking at sort of what's the purpose of the union. So the union basically just brings all these data sets, stacks them on top of each other. That's probably the most simplistic way you can probably explain it. Some of the things that you'll see in here is sort of, oh, sorry, has it popped up on the... and here is that if there's mismatches. So common reasons for mismatches is that you got fields in one data set but not in the other, or there's different names, so that let's say a name of field in one data set's called month, the other one's called month end. Tableau Prep won't necessarily match them together, so that's where you may have to go in through do a manual match when you select them. Other ones may be a mismatch because of different data types. So one may be a string, another one's actually a number. So a classic example of this is if you're looking for financial systems, you'll know that there's for expense line items, they have a code. So that code you may, in one data set, may pick it up as a string, and the other one may actually pick it up as a number. And therefore there'll be a sort of a mismatch when Tableau Prep is looking at it. One thing I have picked up, and I'll show you further down the screen, I've set one up here, and one of the questions in the Q&A is, what are you looking forward for Tableau Prep in future ones? One thing is, one limitation that I've picked up in is around the number of data sets you can actually union. It seems at the moment, and I'd love if someone would be able to correct me if I'm doing something wrong, that there seems a limitation of only 10 data sets can actually work in a union. So as an example of here, so union, just drag and drop your new data set in. Yes, we now have 9 items. We now have 10 items within that union. And then you can bring the next one. No, it doesn't work in because it's number 11. And so that's one thing that I would love to see in the next or in future iteration of Tableau Prep to actually, it just makes life a little easier. The workaround we've basically done is basically do half years, so 6 months and 6 months, and then you can union a union. And so that's the way we've sort of stacked them. So the next side of things is that, so if we go up to the cleanse, so I'll just bring this back up. And so as part of this, so the purpose of the cleanse is basically we have our union of our data sets, but for what the purpose of what the chart is, if you think about it, at the end of what we're trying to achieve, there's lots of surplus columns that we no longer require. So part of the cleanse is basically looking at what do we not need. Making the data file smaller, which makes the process a lot better at the back end. So as much as you can do at the front end, and Tableau Prep will make life for you a lot easier when you're dealing with a Tableau. So and the other side of things is actually creating new measures or dimensions, as my fellow presenters already demonstrated. One of the ones we have found actually quite useful is actually, for those who are familiar with the sort of calculations, is around the date. So creating date fields. So you'll see in here that there are actual, if I can find them quickly. So there's actually fields of when the data was actually extracted, but it's a time date. But what we want to, from a reporting perspective, especially in a finance sense, you generally want to actually use the last day of the month. Now, with the calculations that Tableau and Tableau Prep use, quite often it is actually take it to the first day of the month, not the last day of the month. So the sort of workarounds that we actually use is, so I'll just go step by step. So basically, if I bring the edit up, so bring up the reporting month. So date trunk takes the report time and takes it back to the month, and then takes it back one day. So basically the extract's taken after the end of the month, so therefore that's why you take it, it's extracted in February. Your date trunk would take it to the 1st of February, and you minus one day, lo and behold, you've got the 31st of January. If you're wanting for our purposes here, where we're also wanting a what's the following month, so just as a step-by-step, you can actually put in the next one. So here goes the reporting month we've created, and we're going to add 2 months to it. So instead of being the end of January, it's now going to be the end of March. And then close that. And then the following one, you want to bring it back a month. So once again, take it back from the end of March to the 1st of March, and then take away one day. So you can wrap that up all in one calculation if you want to be a little bit smarter. But here I've just split it out to make it a lot simpler for people to follow. So the next one is, so after all the cleans, we sort of create an aggregate. So for that, if you recall back what the chart looked like, it was actually at quite a high level. So it's over the whole project on a time basis. The data we have is at the lowest level we could possibly want it. So that's why we want to aggregate up to a high level, which you can do in Tableau. But as I said before, if you do it in Tableau Prep, if you do it earlier in the piece, it makes it a lot easier and simpler to do it within Tableau. So once again, a consideration of when you're doing your flows is to understand what are you actually reporting at the end. And so if you do need to do charts that you want to delve into the analytical side of things at a lower level, don't worry about aggregating. However, if you've got something that's a process that's going to be standardized and it's at a higher level, you might as well aggregate early and make life easy for you once you actually get into creating the visualization within Tableau. So once we're actually done the aggregate, so here we've done it on reporting month, done it on the project, also pulled through the various different period end dates, because as you'll recall, we want to actually find out what we said in 1 month was going to be the next month. So we need to actually pull through those periods, and aggregated fields on the forecasts and what the actual values for those various different months. Similar process is done for the current month. The only thing is the current month, we actually want to actually retain all that future forecasting information. So once you get those sort of two, once again, union those two data sets. So you basically create one large data set. And you'll see here the union, there's a couple of mismatch fields. Now that's because one's got planned value. So in the current file, It also has planned value as well as forecast costs, which I said is basically your future-looking data, and which isn't in the other one. So basically all that does is we retain it in there, and then there'll be null fields in everything that's actually relating to the data that's coming from the historical fields in those two columns. So once we've done that, create out the output. As a lot of you probably already know, there's different types of outputs that you can create. Me personally, I tend to go for the hyper. Makes it a lot easier for managing within Tableau. And then at the back end, if you're actually exporting to someone else and they are using different systems or different tools, well, then actually a CSV is actually very useful and handy for them to use. So from that, I shall go back into Tableau. And so, yeah, after generating the report, we come back to the visualization. So this is what it was looking like before, and this is what it looks like after. It's exactly the same. So, which is what we wanted to do. So there's no visible difference because all the change has actually occurred in the process that sits behind the visualization, not actually what has been displayed. So basically, some of it is you'll understand that the improvements that you've actually made in the process and everything won't necessarily be noticed or appreciated by the end user, because for them it's exactly the same chart. However, for those that sort of are working behind the scenes of creating all this sort of things, we sort of all understand the benefits of the time savings and everything else that sort of, and the robustness that gets created in using something like Tableau Prep rather than data manipulation and workarounds within Excel to actually bring into Tableau. So basically the impact that sort of actually made a difference to that organization is, yeah, there was an improved robustness of the process. So there was no data manipulation required in Excel. The processes were carried out exactly the same as the previous time, month on month. Rather than previously there were risks of the process not being correctly followed and being inconsistent. So therefore the end result wasn't exactly the same. The other key thing is auditable, which is a great benefit of Tableau Prep. So changes in the original data is recorded and traceable. So that's absolutely great when you need to go back and try to remember what you did of how you actually created something. Previously done in Excel, everyone does it their own way, and there's no record of what changes you have made. So the other side is reduce complexity. So as the data has already been shaped to your purposes, the number and complexity of calculations required in Tableau itself from all those different multiple sources is actually reduced. So as part of that, it actually makes it life a lot easier when you're actually working with the data within Tableau. So the other side is reduced time. So as part of the monthly processing reporting, the manual steps required to shape and cleanse data is replaced by a repeatable process that is pretty much automated. So for this client, the time, as an example, the time saving across all visualizations in that dashboard alone was approximately a day and a half, which if you multiply that over month by month by month, makes it very worthwhile. And so, and over all the monthly reporting processes that were for that client that we actually now actually pulling through Tableau Prep, it was like 2.5 days per month for the reporting processes. So for those involved in reporting processes, whether it's financial, operational, there's quite often there's a deadline that you need to meet because you need to get the report out in time to whatever governance group, whether it's the executive or to the board or everything. So they say they've got a meeting coming, so you need to get your report completed. By reducing by 2.5 days, that's absolutely massive when it comes to actually reporting. And the other thing that's actually key, which is when you come to Tableau itself, is that there's improved speed. So with a single clean data set and like a hyperfile rather than multiple expert workbooks feeding into Tableau, plus the reduced complexity of the Tableau calculations, the speed that renders the visualizations when you're switching from project to project, and your different filters and everything else in Tableau is vastly improved. So, so for us users, that makes a key headache that we see just disappear. And so that's me. So thanks for listening. Jack, is there any questions?
There is. Thanks, Stephen. I think everyone can see there that Tableau Prep has massively improved your pipeline on so many levels for different clients. A few questions for you. So going back to the union issue, you're right in saying that the maximum inputs you can have to a single union tool is 10. Tableau's advice, and a question from Jenny, is there any reason why you're not using a wildcard union in the input tool to bring in multiple files together?
No, haven't really explored that one too much. For the client, a lot of it will probably actually come into what their sophistication of what they're actually able to do. For some of us users, which are a little more technical, so therefore it's a lot easier for us to actually do those sort of things. However, when you're dealing with a lower level of sophistication and knowledge of what's going on, especially when it hands from different people throughout different organizations, sometimes it's a lot simpler to do something that they understand. So for them just to put 6 into one, 6 into another, and union together, it makes life understandable for them. Is probably the only reason I could say, without going into a little bit more technical, sort of trying to upskill them and actually understanding exactly what they need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Another question is, I'm sure working with Excel files a lot, that you're familiar with the data interpreter in Tableau Prep. A question from Rude is that, do you feel that it might potentially need a rework in Prep? Do you find it works to your needs, or are there areas you feel it could be improved?
Tableau interpreter, can't say myself that I have used that.
Okay.
But so sorry, I can't answer. If any other presenters are on the line that could, if they have come across it.
I have a bit of experience with it, not masses. For me, it generally works quite well to do some of the basic cleanup of a messy Excel file. It tends to work when someone's almost tried to, or for me anyway, like format an Excel file with a title and a subheading and that kind of thing to get rid of that.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. So I haven't. It hasn't. It's a function within Tableau that's probably come through to Tableau Prep as well. Is that right, Joe?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So
it's in desktop as well.
Yeah, I've found it sometimes it's a lot easier just to delete because sometimes the data sets that come through are very messy in Excel, especially if they are, I'll say, user generated rather than system generated. And so some of that just may need a cleanup. So
Sure. And then, so this is actually quite an interesting question. I hadn't really thought about it before, and it can go to all the panelists. So Joe, Mohammed, if you want to weigh in as well, if you have an opinion on it. But so a question from Rude is, I feel like Tableau is underselling Prep's potential as a communication tool within organizations, bridging a data literacy gap purely by interface design. What's your stance on this?
I think, it's because of, to me, the simplicity of actually understanding the data sets and how they actually move through, which quite often historically has sat within the IT function of an organization. But now with tools like Tableau Prep as well as Tableau, it actually does make it a lot easier and accessible to people who wouldn't traditionally work with data. So I do think it's definitely something that's worthwhile and helps you communicate the story of what's going on in the organization a lot better.
Yeah, sure. Joe, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's a lot of value in the profile pane itself. So even if you just got someone to literally connect to data and look at the profile pane, I think there's a lot you can just understand by seeing those histograms and sorting and seeing those values that you might not get as easily just looking at the data in Excel or something. So even that very basic, just connecting, looking in a clean step, I think could improve that data literacy.
Also, I don't think they're underselling it. I think that's exactly what they're selling. As in, I don't think Tableau Prep is trying to compete with ETL tools or whatever tools there are out there. They're just giving the analyst a tool to discover and explore their data and create some repeatable process to lift some of the manual load they have to do every week or every month.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think they're selling the tool in quite a good way. It's a very unique tool in terms of data prep and what it does. And I think that's the draw to it for a lot of people is the visual side of it. And so the final question we've got here, which I guess can go to Joe and Mohammed as well. Stephen, you didn't utilize the scripting tools in your presentation. I don't know whether you've used them at all. But have you often come across functionality that you could either do in a script or via steps in prep? And what considerations do you take in deciding where to do it? I think there's obviously a lot that you can do in prep and the scripting tools, but I would always go for doing it in prep because otherwise you've got to write out a script for each of those individual steps. And if you start doing everything in the scripting tool while using Tableau Prep a tool, is what I would say to that. But yeah, Joe and Mohammed, be interesting to get your stance.
Just agree with what you said exactly.
Yeah, same with me.
Okay, great. So we're a little bit over time, but thank you all for tuning into this morning. I know for some of you, like Stephen, it may be late in your evenings, or if you're more over my way in London, you've had an early start for this one. But I think it's been a really great session, some really interesting talks there. If you're interested in talking at a future session, feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can see my handles there. Or if there's just any feedback on the session in general, feel free to reach out and connect. The next session will most likely be in June. We're looking at running these every 2 months, so look out for that. And I hope you all stay healthy and well during these times. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.